Think back to the last district-wide professional development day or faculty meeting you led, or one you sat through. The cafeteria lights were humming, everyone had their laptops half open. Up on the projector screen went slide 12, a dense, multicolored graph charting standardized benchmark metrics, followed by a list of 8 district goals, formatted in 8-point font. Let me ask you an honest question. How much of that did anyone carry back to their classroom the next morning? Probably none of it. And it's not because teachers don't care. It's because bullet points don't transform school culture. Now think about the school leader who stood up at the start of a grueling school year, skipped the policy binder, and told the story of Marcus, a ninth grader who entered the building reading 3 grade levels behind, terrified to raise his hand until an art teacher noticed his sketchbook and built a bridge that not only kept him from dropping out, but got him back on grade level. You remember that story. You remember how quiet the auditorium got. You remember why you got into education in the first place. Human beings do not dedicate their lives to test scores or compliance mandates. We dedicate ourselves to people and purpose. Welcome back to Unpacking the Backpack, the show where we unpack the practical strategies, real-world lessons, and essential tools you need to create schools that work for every learner. As always, I'm your host, Eric Scheninger. Today, we're diving deep into the pack to examine what might be the single most transformative, under-leveraged tool in school administration, the power of storytelling as an educational leader. Let's unzip the pack and get to work. Education is swimming in data. We have state assessments, longitudinal growth models, attendance metrics, disciplinary referrals, and district improvement plans. Data is necessary. It gives us a diagnosis. It identifies gaps, inequities, and trends. But here is the hard truth every administrator must confront. Data identifies the problem, but story mobilizes the people to solve it. When you lead exclusively with data, spreadsheets, and top-down mandates, you trigger compliance, not commitment. Staff will nod, check the box, sign the roster, and close their classroom doors to do what they've always done. Why? Because data speaks only to the analytical mind. When you share raw numbers, your staff's brains process the information through language and logic centers. They evaluate you like an auditor evaluates an inventory report. They look for flaws in the methodology or reasons why the numbers don't apply to their specific classroom or student roster. When you wrap evidence in a human narrative, the dynamic shifts completely. Neuroscience calls this neurocoupling. When you tell the story of a real student, an overwhelmed first-year teacher, or a breakthrough moment in the classroom, the listener's brain mirrors your own. Their sensory and emotional centers fire. By framing your vision within a narrative arc, you trigger the release of cortisol to build focus on the real challenges facing kids. Oxytocin to foster empathy and shared responsibility across grade levels, and dopamine when you celebrate collective growth. All right, everyone, did you get that? Cortisol, oxytocin, dopamine. It's all based on brain science. Storytelling isn't soft leadership. It isn't a motivational gimmick to slap on the beginning of an agenda. It's strategic architecture of influence. It is how you take abstract strategic initiatives, whether it's active learning, digital transformation, or restorative practices, and make them tangible, urgent, and attainable for every educator in your building, district, or system. If storytelling is an essential administrative competency, what narratives do you actually need? What narratives do you need in your backpack? Sorry, a little tongue twisted here. You don't need a background in theater. And you don't need to deliver a TED talk every Monday morning. To build culture and drive change, you need mastery over 3 specific stories. Number 1, the vulnerable why I lead story. Too many administrators think leadership requires projecting an image of absolute perfection. They believe that once they step into the principal's office or central administration, they can never admit to having struggled in the classroom or made a wrong call. Invulnerability creates an insurmountable distance between you and your staff. Your why I lead story is rooted in your own instructional crucible. What was the mistake you made as a teacher that fundamentally changed how you see students? What was the moment you realized the traditional system was failing a child in your room, forcing you to rethink everything you knew about teaching? For me, it was when a student told me school was like a jail, as I chased him through the halls of my building when he broke our cell phone policy. That was the moment that rocked my world and got me to rethink my lens. When you share your struggles and the hard lessons you learned along the way, you build psychological safety, something I talk a lot about on this podcast. You give your staff permission to take risks, innovate without fear of immediate failure, and view mistakes as data points for growth. Number 2, the cost of complacency story. The hardest barrier to pedagogical change isn't active resistance, it's inertia. It is the comfortable pull of, this is how we've always done it. When leaders push for instructional shifts, moving away from passive worksheets toward active student-centered learning focused on cognitive lift, they often focus entirely on the new tools or the logistical rollout. The staff hears another initiative that will pass in 2 years. To disrupt inertia, you must tell the story of the cost of standing still. Showcase what happens when our practices fail to prepare students for the modern world outside school walls. Contrast the student who disengages in a passive, lecture-driven room with the opportunities that unlock when the same student is empowered through ownership, inquiry, and authentic problem solving. A compelling cost of complacency story honors past efforts while providing that yesterday's methods are no longer sufficient for tomorrow's graduates. Number 3, the classroom in the wild story, how we elevate others. The biggest trap in leadership storytelling is making yourself the protagonist. If every example you give is about what you did as a teacher or as a principal, or how you solved a school-wide crisis, you foster resentment. The most transformative stories a school leader can tell are those that shine a light on the quiet daily victories happening in hallway classrooms. Talk about the 3rd grade team that revamped their math blocks to foster peer collaboration. Highlight the custodian who noticed a student sitting alone and became their daily mentor. Share the story of the veteran teacher who stepped out of their comfort zone to implement student-led portfolios. When you consistently tell classroom in the wild stories, you redefine what your school values. You validate hard work, scale effective practices organically, and prove that the vision isn't just an administrative theory. It's already living and breathing in room 204. Now, let's get tactical. You're addressing your staff at a faculty meeting, writing a community newsletter, or speaking at a board workshop. How do you construct a narrative that shifts mindsets? I want you to use a simple, practical 5-step blueprint that I designed specifically for educational leaders. The SCALE framework. SCALE. S is for setting. how you ground the context. Establish the scene quickly with a specific detail. Instead of saying, we've seen student engagement issues, say, last October, I sat in the back of an 8th grade science class at 1:15 on a Friday afternoon. A vivid anchor instantly draws listeners in. C, challenge. The pedagogical or cultural tension. State the friction clearly. What was holding the student, teacher, or grade level back? Was it fear of failure, disengagement, or lack of support? A story without tension is just a memo in disguise. A, action. This is the pedagogical shift. What deliberate choice was made? Focus on the change in practice. How a teacher altered their questioning strategy, scaffolded support, or empowered student voice. L is for learning, the measurable and emotional outcome. What happened next? Connect the human transformation with real evidence, the spark of confidence in the student's eyes paired with improved academic growth or attendance. And E is for echo, the bridge to school culture. This is your leadership punchline. Connect the story directly to the shared work of the building or the district. That breakthrough in room 12 is why we are rethinking our assessment practices this semester. So again, the scale framework: S, setting; C, challenge; A, action; L, learning; E, echo. Keep these stories tight. 2 to 3 minutes is all you need. Deliver the narrative, extract the principle, and bridge it directly to the shared mission. That brings us to something new I'm kind of thinking about, toying around here on the podcast. The backpack unpack. I know you're excited. This is the section of the show where we pull out one actionable challenge you can implement in your system this week. Here's the assignment. Build a school narrative bank. Take an index card or open a dedicated note on your phone. Over the next 5 days, intentionally look for and capture 3 stories during your classroom walkthroughs or hallway conversations. Look for a story of student resilience, a student who overcame a specific academic or emotional barrier because a staff member refused to give up on them. A story of pedagogical innovation, a colleague who tried a new strategy for him or her, hit a bump, adjusted on the fly, and saw student learning improve. A story of unsung impact, a paraprofessional, a bus driver, secretary, or cafeteria worker whose quiet action changed a child's entire day. Write down just the names, the challenge, and the takeaway. The next time you walk into a staff meeting, draft a family update or present to your school board. Leave those generic slides behind. Open your pack, pull out one of these real stories, and remind everyone why your school and district exists. When you control the narrative, you inspire the culture. I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Unpacking the Backpack. Sorry, I have a little construction going on outside today, but it's the only day I'm home, so I had to get this podcast recorded. If this episode gave you a practical tool to lead your school forward, take a screenshot, share it on your social channels, or with an administrative colleague, tag me. Don't forget to hit subscribe on Spotify or wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, give that podcast a nice review. Till next time, keep your backpack organized, focus on what matters the most, and lead with a story that inspires your school community. Take care, everyone, and as always, keep making a difference in the lives of students and the people you serve.